Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's special guest is Rivka Stern, and Rivka practiced as a pediatric occupational therapist for over 2 decades before realizing that the most effective way to help children is by working directly with the parents, which I know is true, and I know you guys have heard on the show before. So Rivka's drawn on her professional expertise and her personal expertise raising 6 children, and she now empowers parents with the skills, tools, and support they need to navigate their child's challenging behaviors. Her work is grounded in the belief that behavior is a form of communication, and that when a child's needs are met and the parent is regulated, difficult behaviors naturally decrease. And I know you all have heard me talk about it before of like, we need to regulate ourselves to help regulate our children. So Rivka, go into it a little bit more for those that might not know, like regulated, dysregulated, like what's the difference and how do you differentiate between the two?
So I like to use an analogy that our physical bodies, we have homeostasis, right? We all have an internal temperature of around 98.6. And sometimes we veer from that a little more, a little less, and sometimes we veer a lot, right? If it's a sickness or if we're in some type of environment that takes us out of that homeostasis. But the basic principle is that we all have this natural homeostasis of a particular temperature, and our body is always trying to keep us at that particular temperature. And I compare that same thing to regulation, okay? Regulation is actually the homeostasis of our nervous system. Our natural state is to be regulated, even though in this modern crazy world, it doesn't seem that way. But believe it or not, our natural state is to be regulated. Now, that doesn't mean that, again, we leave that calm, feeling good in our body state, which I call the regulated state. We could leave that state sometimes because we could get really upset about something, or we could be very angry and want to, lash out. That's normal when we talk about regulation and dysregulation. The problem is when dysregulation becomes our homeostasis, it becomes our normal state. That's when a lot of problems happen. And that's true with parents, and that's true with kids.
Right. So like, it's interesting because I haven't heard of it that way before, but like, I get it of the regulation and dysregulation. Although, I mean, it's possible to be regulated and then dysregulated. You know what I mean?
Yes.
How does that differentiate in the sense of, yeah.
It is possible we want to, as much as possible, stay in this regulated space, right? Because when we are regulated, our brains work so much better. We can reflect, we can learn, we can process things. We could, instead of just yelling at our child, if we're regulated, we're going to step back and say, let me work on changing my thought, or let me address them in a calmer way. That's what regulation allows us to do. So what I'm saying is that sometimes, yes, dysregulation is a part of normal life. The goal is to stay in that regulated state as much as possible and have that be our natural state, knowing that there will be times that we are dysregulated because that is part of normal life. especially in our modern type of lifestyle and, all the stress that people are under. But to always go back to that homeostasis, to that place of calm, to that place that we can deal with things in a more calm and effective type of way, rather than just reacting to things throughout our day.
Got it. Right. So like I'm thinking along the lines of like, I know when I dysregulate because I've been living with myself for how many years, right? And it's I guess, the regulated part of it is being aware that, okay, I'm dysregulated right now. So I need to take my step out to regulate myself before I can interact with anybody else. Because if I try to interact with somebody in this dysregulated state, it's not going to be pretty and it's not going to be productive, right?
Exactly. And also I think, you're showing self-awareness, just being able to step back and process that and think about that. Sometimes if we're severely dysregulated, we don't even have that ability to go through that that self-awareness, and that piece is really lacking in many people just because they're so dysregulated. It's hard to step back and see things from afar and process things and reflect. So it's a good point that you bring up about having that self-awareness also.
And I think, I'm just thinking about the kids, the younger kids, obviously. I mean, obviously we all know once a child, an adult, anybody is fully dysregulated, like forget it. Like nothing you say or do is going to help in this situation. But the idea of like for kids where IEPs will come in place and what you can do in the classroom and what parents can do is to help kids learn what their triggers are and learn before they become dysregulated fully, right? Of like to notice the things.
I hear you. The problem is that a child has a very hard time learning their triggers.
Right.
What I would say is more important is that the adults in the room need to be the ones who, again, use that self-reflection to step back, to analyze, to reflect. When does Johnny usually melt down? Oh, it's during transition time. So how can we reset the way we present things? How can we say things differently? How can we do things differently? Because the ownership is never really on the kid. And I think that's a lot of times where professionals sort of get it wrong, is they try to teach kids, whether it's through therapy or social emotional learning. And I'm not negating those things. Everything has its place, but they need to understand that the child is not usually capable of that noticing. It's the adults around them that need to take that responsibility and change the environment. So if I could give an example, because I think parents really love like concrete examples, if I could give an example of this, I was working with a child, and every time he had to give his bike, they would do like biking around the area in the preschool. Every time it was time to give his bike up to another child, he would literally have a complete meltdown. And they didn't know what to do, because they would say, oh, we have to give Sally her turn. It's, we have to share, using all those typical words. And I came in and I said, look, what if I said to the teachers, I said, imagine years ago when the family, they had a little bit of food, right? When there was food scarcity. We don't have that anymore, thank God. Now we have the opposite problem. But, imagine someone comes and says to the family, you need to give us your food. You need to share, right? And the family is saying, I'm sorry, I need to give my family this food or we will die. I cannot share. And I explained to the teachers that was the reaction that this child had. I cannot share my bike. It triggered his fight or flight response every time they said that. So what did we do? We tricked his fight or flight response. We went around it. How? We made a parking spot that we have to park the bike in the garage. We created this fun story. Oh, I have to park the parking lot. Oh, which parking spot do you want? We're going around that fight or flight because we're looking at things from the child's perspective instead of the teacher's perspective. Or, oh my gosh, who can run? Can I run to the gym, the climbing area faster, or can you run? And he jumps off his bike and he doesn't think about Sally going on it. Yeah. So many times in the schools, in our parenting, we come at kids as an adult.
Yep.
Please do this now. Daddy's on a call. We can't be here. We can't be here now. Daddy's doing a Zoom meeting. It's really important. Shh.
Right.
What that says to the kid is, oh, as
right.
opposed to, oh my gosh, you know what? Do you want to pick out one of your cars and we can go upstairs? I think your car looks a little dirty. Should we get some bubble bath and give your car a car? Oh yeah, let's go.
Right.
So it's a different way of thinking that we just don't have sometimes. But if we can really stop and reflect, there are these easy ways to prevent the meltdowns and prevent the resistance. But it's important.
And
power struggles,
the power struggles, right?
The power struggles.
We're not going to win as parents. You're never going to win a power struggle with your child.
We never win. We never, ever win. I tell parents,
right?
I say it's like two ropes pulling. The kid doesn't put the rope down. I said, we as the parents need to have the maturity and get rid of our ego and say, I'm putting down my side of the rope because the kids will pull.
Because there is no more, like when I grew up in the era of the, why? Because I'm the mommy and I said so, because I'm the daddy and I said so. And that doesn't work in today's world. There is none of that, just because.
For good or for bad, because there is a lot more respect for children than those types of ways. But I guess kids did listen better, but there's both sides.
But what, to what detriment to them, you know what I mean? We grew up in fear of, if we do this, then that's going to happen, rather than making the conscious choice of, oh, I want to do this because then this, and looking at it. I know, I think back, I still use it today with my kids, and it's getting that power struggle of, you need to shower. No, I don't want to. You need to get in the shower. No, what am I going to do? Pick up the kid and throw them in the shower? Well, no. But I bet you can't get in the shower before I get to 10. Boom, they're in the shower before I get to 10, because I gave up that power struggle and came to, what is my objective here? To win this battle with my child, or to get my child in the shower? And how do I adjust to get my child into the shower, right? And that's that. So that's where you come in and help parents figure out, here's some ways we can get around this battle.
It's one of the things I do. I help parents. They say that when you're inside the picture, you can't see the beautiful, art. My job is to take parents out of the picture because they're so in it. And then we could see, oh, maybe if I say something this way, maybe if I approach my child like this, so it's really taking them out and reflecting and looking at better ways to do things.
Right. Yeah. Different ways. It's just, and it makes, to me, it helps the children with their own autonomy, with their own decision-making, of not just because I'm expected to do it. And it
doesn't work. It doesn't work. When I see all these parents complain about their teens, and yes, the hormones, yes, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think if you create a home that gives a child power, gives a child control, makes them feel, the child feels respected, when they become teens, they continue that. And it's the ones who are the parents who are controlling every move. I said this, so you have to do it. When the child, those kids, when the child becomes a teenager, all hell breaks loose because the kid says, you can't control me anymore. I'm too big and I'm too independent now. So, you know, it's really important when they're little to really give them that feeling of autonomy and power, just like every adult wants to feel like we're in control of our lives. Nobody wants us, you know, to do this, do that, you know, we want connection. So everything that I share with parents is really about, well, how do you want to be treated?
Yeah. And
It's
I
really
know,
about that.
a lot, especially the older generation is like, but they're kids. They need to respect their old elders. But like, that doesn't work anymore.
The
Like,
respect comes when you respect them.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and how do you know, how does a child learn how to respect unless they see other people doing that? You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
modeling.
A lot of
And
modeling.
yeah, if you're talking nasty to your child all the time, guess what? Your child's going to turn around and talk nasty to you because they see this is the way you're supposed to behave when you're an adult. And that's
Yeah.
what they think is supposed to happen, rather
Yes.
than they don't see it as you're the adult. You get to talk this way. I'm a child. I can't talk that way. You know what I mean? Like it just like finding that
Definitely.
fine line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, like I know today's world, it's kids seem to be a lot more dysregulated.
Mhm.
Why do you have any theories of why that's happening?
I do. Would you like me to share? I'm kidding.
Sure, please.
Um,
Yeah.
um, okay. So, first of all, free play is one of the most regulating things for children. When I talk about free play, I don't mean like going to a gymboree class, even though those are great. I'm talking about unsupervised, a bunch of kids running around. Oh, the princess is over here. Oh, let's make this fort. That is so healthy and regulating for children. And unfortunately, it's decreasing more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whether it's because of the screens, which that's a whole nother topic.
Right.
I struggle with in my own family, we all do. But the free play, the just that fresh air, that nature, all
Yeah.
those things promote a regulated child. We have a lot of I think I would say over-involved parenting, to the point of kids kind of feeling like, they
Yeah.
can't like make a move without some commentary. There's just been a lot more
And I see that.
over-involvement in
Yeah.
children's
Like
lives, which is not healthy
I
for them.
remember, right, like, I remember as a kid, we were, like, come home when the streetlights come on, If we
And
were hungry for
that's
lunch, we would come home and
wonderful.
have lunch, but we were out playing with our friends. Did my parents know exactly where we were? No, but they knew we were out down the block, and they knew if they came out and yelled our name, somebody would come in. And it wasn't until, like, my kids didn't have that because when I moved into my neighborhood, there were no other kids, but, like,
Yeah.
now we finally have a lot of kids, and so my kids are doing that. Although these days it's a little bit scarier, unfortunately, because of the way society has become and what's going on out there. And, I don't want to be that helicopter parent. I want my kids to be able to go and play, but I also need to know where they are to an extent because I don't trust that somebody drives by and could snatch them, or you know what I mean? Like in my mind with all of that
I
other
mean,
crazy stuff,
I think
right?
some of that is that sort of mind games, like the world's more dangerous. Like I
Yeah.
think if you actually look at data, I think it's probably pretty similar in terms of like God forbid, a kid being snatched, those kinds of things. I think it's more like fear mongering a little bit of like, oh my gosh. And it's for us parents to work on our own anxiety, and saying like, is this really true? Is this really accurate? Because it's really important for young kids to feel like they can walk to a friend's house. It creates self-confidence. It gives them, that the world is not a scary place. So I think it's important for parents to check, kind of double check. Well, is this fear mongering? Is this the actual reality of things? And that's important also. But everyone has to be comfortable with, obviously, but also to check your thoughts, to look at.
And it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Like it's hard because of what we hear. I do a lot of work with the abuse and neglect system in DC Superior Court. And so like what I see and what I hear going on out there with, with stuff, it's like I start getting with the trafficking that's big down, and like, oh my gosh, and the grooming and all that other stuff. And I start getting paranoid, which I know is paranoid, but it's a reality that it could be happening. So it's what do I need to do?
I mean, I think you ask questions, certain neighborhoods, or, like it has to be the.
But it's also teaching the kids, if this situation happens, how do you handle it? What do you do? Role playing. Like, hey, what if you and your friends were down at the stream and somebody came up and said XYZ? What would you do? How would you react? What would, and like kind of having that, like, if you felt uncomfortable, where would you go first?
My mom always used to say.
Right.
Yeah, she always used to say, go find a mom. Like if you don't know, if there's no policeman, go find a mother. Because a mother's a safe person with kids, she'd always tell me that.
But but like even if there was a policeman, my friend has always said, and I did it also, of like, people pretend to be cops. You don't know the difference. Like, whereas if you go find a moms, you always know it's who's a mom. Mom's, somebody with a little kid. You always know safe, and they will, but that's what I teach my child too. But, also the things of like, if you're out and you're a couple blocks from home, which neighbor's house are you going to go to? Like, if you feel uncomfortable, you're not going to make it the 3 blocks home potentially. So where would you go and what would you do? I read something the other day. Somebody's like, if you're ever in a situation as a child and you feel uncomfortable, go up to whatever woman you can and say, auntie, because a woman will know what you mean.
Word.
Right. I don't know. But it's, those are the things, but I like how you relate that to regulation. The ability to regulate is being able to have that interaction with friends.
And remember, when I talk about free play, remember also how kindergarten looked when we were in kindergarten. Was the big decision was, should we do our artwork or should we go to the play, to the dress up area? That was our stress. And now, like, as an OT, I've worked in many, many schools, and like, I literally see 5-year-olds breaking down into tears because their teachers are giving them math tests and like things that are just not appropriate. So that's, again, a whole nother thing. But when we talk about dysregulation and the need for free play, I would love to see free play and that kind of non-academic type of things brought back into kindergarten. Because it's crazy what's happening now, I think, in the schools and the pressure.
Expectations.
It's not age appropriate.
No, exactly. The expectations of kids beginning to read in kindergarten is 100% not developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
At all. And then all of a sudden, like, first graders that can't read are considered to be slow. And it's like, but developmentally, they shouldn't be learning to read until first grade. Like, where is being a kid? A lot of people, my listeners have heard me say, and I say it all the time, is that my kids don't really do homework. Like, if they want to, okay, but I don't enforce it because I'm like, when do they get to be a kid? Yeah. It's so hard in today's world of like, well, they're doing Taekwondo and they're doing ballet or they're doing piano lessons or they're doing this and they're doing that. And then they have their homework. And when do they get that downtime of just being a kid? Playing outside with their friends, playing Minecraft, playing Roblox, whatever it is, imagination, doing their own artwork. Like, when do they get to do that stuff? Because today's, we're so overbooked with everything these days. And I go back and forth, like, with my parenting of, like, I feel like a bad parent because I've never had my kids, like, they did Taekwondo for a little bit. They didn't love it. One does gymnastics, and, when, they've tried this, they've tried that. And I don't have them in something that they're passionate about, like long-term to become good at. But I'm like, but they're kids and they're having fun. So that's
they're
okay.
Fine.
Right? They'll be fine.
They're fine.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like, I hear other people like, oh, my kids are doing soccer and are this and that. And I'm like, am I a bad parent because I'm not doing that?
No.
But that's the thing. Like, all of us as parents are like, could we be doing something different, And that comes into our own emotional state and regulation and all that other stuff of where we are. Like, it just letting go of our own thoughts about what things should be and how they should be, right?
Well, I always say kids do not need or want a perfect parent. They want a good enough parent. And those are the parents that we don't put pressure on ourselves. We don't put pressure on ourselves. We say we're doing the best we can. We're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's okay. And we're going to put our egos aside, and we're going to apologize to our children when we do make a mistake. And that's how wonderful relationships grow with our kids and wonderful connections grow with them.
Yeah, definitely. It's all, and I know, like, regulating yourself and stuff, people say all the time, like, you need to fill your own cup because you can't help your kids unless you help yourself and regulate. And it's challenging. It's hard because it's, emotional regulation is not something that you're taught, that anybody's taught, right? And if you've never had the model.
But again, when we go back to, it's our go-to normal state, it's that all the pressures of modern life and not prioritizing certain things that's taken us away from it being our normal state. But if we can remind ourselves, this is our normal state. What do I have to do to get back to that state? And I'm going to prioritize that. That's the key. That's the key. Because you'll hear, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And if your hot water boiler broke and there was water all over the floor, would you have time to focus and make phone calls and deal with it? Yes. Because it's like it's something on fire. Like, we put fires out.
Yeah.
Forget putting the fires out. Do the prevention so that the fires don't start.
Right.
Make the time a priority. Everyone has the time. Sometimes I would take my kids, they were little, I would take them to, like, some baseball field with some shovels and some toys and some trucks. I would literally run around the baseball field because I needed exercise. Maybe I didn't have access to a gym at that point or whatever it was, but, like, that was a priority for me because I needed that. I needed exercise. So I had to figure out a way to get it. And they would play and I would run. And, we have to be creative as parents sometimes to figure out how to give ourselves what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So it was just bringing back to me, like, I had done one parenting class and they called it mind, body, and soul time. Somebody else called it time in. My family now calls it me time, but it's time that parent and child, and sometimes we do it as a family. Sometimes we do it, my husband with one kid, me with one, and then we switch of, like, 15 minutes of focused on the child, whatever the child wants to do. No electronics are allowed, nothing else. It's whatever the child wants to do and focus on that. And it's amazing how behaviors are so different when they have that, because, as you said, putting out the fires. So when kids aren't getting the attention they need and they want, what are they going to do? They're going to start misbehaving. because they don't
Right.
care what the attention is, right? They just
Right.
want the attention. So if what they need to do to get mommy to stop doing or daddy to stop doing to look at me is I need to be hitting my sister, or I need to be, running out the door when I'm supposed to, or letting the dog out, like whatever it is, that's what they're going to do. Whereas if we give them that attention, that like pre-attention, we're not going to have that behavior as much, which to me is like saying, keeping that regulation for all of us, right?
Right. I once worked with a client, and she always felt like she was giving attention to her. Her daughter was a real attention seeker. She just needed that. And when we were working together, she was able to start reflecting, you know what? I thought I was giving her attention, but I really wasn't. It's because she wasn't like present. She might have been checking her phone. Oh yeah, I see you, and like dealing with whatever. And once she started realizing, had this sort of epiphany when her daughter was on the swing and said, Mommy, look at me. Everything, her phone was away. She had her full attention. Oh, wow. Like she got
Yeah.
real attention, not this sort of like,
In
frazzled
today's
type of
world,
attention.
right? Exactly.
So yeah.
And it's a big difference. It's such a big difference for our kids,
Yeah.
And it's like, if you think about it as adults, like I think about, times going out with friends at dinner and they're sitting there like, oh, sorry, hold on a minute. Somebody's texting me. And I'm like sitting there thinking like,
Hello.
am I not important enough? Right. Like, and I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, well, how do you think our kids feel if we're like, it's just like when you're working from home or something and your child comes in and is like, mommy, I need this. Mommy, I need that. I don't have time. Give me a minute. I don't have time.
Yeah.
But if your kid came in with blood gushing, guess what? You're going to have time.
Yeah.
So it's like figuring that out of like, let's balance that time. Like, honey, give me 5 more minutes. Let me finish this meeting. And then you can have my undivided attention, or, figuring out how to make that work. But yeah, so what are some things other than obviously keeping yourself regulated? What are some other ways that parents can help their kids get regulated or stay regulated?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts on that one. I spent my career doing that. So the first
top
thing
3.
The first thing is understanding a little bit of your child's like sensory needs. Do you have a kid who, when you're in a noisy, stimulating place, they kind of get overwhelmed? Or does bright lights bother your child, or certain touch? You want to get a good understanding of whether that's through an OT or just kind of on your own, analyzing and sort of reflecting and thinking about how your child responds to different things. But in order for a child to be regulated, they really need to get their needs met. And needs is a very big basket. There's so many different things in there. And sometimes children have different needs.
Right.
There could be one child who really needs a lot of power and control, feeling a lot of independence and a lot of power, whereas another kid might need more of that attention from a parent, or that hugs or things like that. So it's so individualized for each child. It's not like this generic thing, but the generic thing is the needs must be met in order to be regulated. What kind of needs exactly your child has could be a little bit different, and how much of something or how much they don't, shouldn't get something. So it's really the parents to reflect on that, to be able to set up, like, maybe 2 birthday parties are going to be too overwhelming for your child. That's going to put them into a tizzy. So you're going to like say maybe yes to one or no to the other. It's really about processing and knowing your child to set them up for things that are going to be successful. And I think a lot of times parents they use this word should a lot. Like,
yeah,
my child should be able to go to this place and that place and go here and go there. But when we remove the word should and we replace it with, I can support my child by. So we take away the expectations, we take away the shoulds, and then we replace it with, this is what I can do as the parent to help my child, to support my child. So for instance, if I say to my child, empty the dishwasher, right? And my child is not necessarily in a great place at that moment. If I go to, my 10-year-old should be able to empty a dishwasher, every other 10-year-old can, that's going to create the power struggle.
Right.
That's going to create the meltdown or whatever's to come. But if we step back and replace the should with, I can support my child by, then I say, oh, how about I do the plates and you do the cups? Or maybe it's just, can you, you do the utensils and so it's the parent coming there, figuring out, how am I going to keep my child regulated? It's through how we set up the environment for our kids. Does that answer the question? Or?
Yes, definitely. It's true. It's that mind shift. It's all about the mind shift of, like, to look at the cause. Like for my child, so my little one, she'll get dysregulated majorly. And most of the time I'll stop and think and be like, oh, you know what, honey, why don't you have a snack? And 9 times out of 10, when she gets in that full dysregulation, it's because she's hungry. She hasn't eaten anything. And it's
that's a good point.
Emotion,
hunger.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and that's the thing is like, look at the basic needs. And there's a lot of time when both of my kids, either of them get dysregulated. Sometimes I'll just have them snuggle up with me and I'll hold them until, like to help them co-regulate and then be able to calm their nervous system a little bit and be able to process and see what's really going on. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not like that little thing right then and there. There's something else bigger that's going on, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And it's knowing your child. Like you said, I do that all the time with my weekends of what do we have going on? And my kids have even learned it when I'm like, okay, so so-and-so wants to do this on Saturday. Like, what else do we have this weekend? Because they know if we have too much stuff planned this weekend, it's not going to be fun for anyone.
Right.
So we need a day of like nothing. And then, okay, Sunday we could do 2 activities because we have nothing on Saturday. Or we do one on Saturday and one on Sunday. You know what I mean? And so like, those are the things, know your child, know your family, and make it work.
So you brought up also an important point that I just want to touch upon is when you say like a trigger of something, that it's really a lot of times something beneath it. Because, a lot of times you'll see in schools, they do like the antecedent to the behavior, like the whole, I'm not a fan of behaviorism. I'll be totally honest with you. Because what happens is they go through and they say, what's the antecedent? What came before the behavior, and then what happens after. They have like a thing, a chart.
ABC.
And for me, what happened right before the behavior could actually really have nothing to do with what's actually going on. It's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And that's important besides educators to understand that, but parents to understand that, because it could be a buildup of stress from what happened 3 days ago or something that's been happening. And then something happens, they didn't get the right color cup and they have a complete utter meltdown. It doesn't mean it's necessarily because they have such a hard time accepting that cup. It could be a build up. So it's important to also realize that a trigger is not necessarily something to focus on. Sometimes it is, but not all the time. There's usually a lot. I call it what's underneath the iceberg.
That makes sense. Well, and it totally makes sense. And it's when you look at, the antecedent, behavior consequence and the functional behavior assessments and all that other stuff, when you look at it, like, yeah, you're right. When you look at what's the antecedent, it's not that at all.
No.
Sometimes you can see, okay, it's, every time we go to math class, that's happening. Why?
Yeah.
But like for my daughter, like we discovered she was having a hard time going to math class. Well, we realized it wasn't math class. It was because she went to recess and lunch right before. And it was so overstimulating for lunch and recess. She needed 5 minutes downtime before going to the next. And once we realized that and started that she would go to the counselor's office for 5 minutes before going to math class, all of a sudden all the issues went away. But
I love that.
Again, when you look at it, it looked like math class was the trigger, but that's not what it was. It was and that's why you need to fully look at it.
Yeah. And that requires reflection, analysis, and really looking underneath. So yeah.
So, and I know we could talk forever. I'm just noticing the time, and it's just, but it's such an important topic because it's regulation. It's for all of us. And if we as adults don't learn to regulate, it's hard to help our kids regulate. And we need to, as adults, as the parent, as the adult, learn how to regulate, learn how to, I call it tapping out, learn how to tap out. Like when I'm to the point of I know I'm not going to be able to regulate. And if I stay in this situation, it's going to be really bad. And I'll just say, I need to step out. I need 10 minutes. I'll be back and go for a walk, go do whatever I need to do, and then come back to it so that I don't fully trigger and dysregulate. And that's the modeling for our kids we need to do.
Well, I think also it's important to realize that when we do the things away from those situations to give ourselves, because we talked about giving our kids what they need, but what do we need? I know I need to go for my bike rides. I know that I need some alone, quiet, solitude time. I make sure to build that in my schedule because that's how I'm going to show up and be able to deal with whatever my kids throw at me because I've done it already. But if we kind of don't give ourselves what we need, push ourselves to our limits, no amount of breathing and things in the moment are going to help regulate us. It has to be a big picture of all the stuff and what we do away from that moment.
That's so true. And show our kids that that's what we're doing. Mommy needs 10 minutes to go do some deep breathing because mommy didn't have a chance to work out this morning that I needed to do. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been so awesome. So if people, so parents listening, they're like, oh, I need some help. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So first of all, I work virtually. So I see people all over the country. It does not matter where someone is located. So just so everyone knows that. My website is www.invitecalm.com. That's the name of my business. I'm on Instagram at stern.rivka. And you could also shoot me an email. I'm at rivka@invitecalm.com. So those are the ways they could get in touch with me.
Great.
And it's been really fun. It's been a great podcast. Very informative, and it's been great.
Thank you so much for being a guest.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to Stress Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.